Late 1942. The war on the Eastern Front hangs in the balance. On paper, the Wehrmacht survived the last Russian winter and its armies stand deep in Soviet territory. But in reality, 12 months of Ostkrieg has kind of ruined the German army. Losses in men and material have been devastating and in many ways crippled the war machine. The choice is simple: rebirth or destruction. I'm Indy Neidell. This is a World War II special about the current state of the German army. When the Wehrmacht unleashes its forces in Operation Barbarossa in June 1941, it has reasons to feel optimistic. With an immediate backup of reserves, the German army can muster 205 divisions, more than 3.3 million men in the field. Yet, despite excessive propaganda efforts showing armored and motorized units flooding through Western Europe, the nucleus of the German army is, and has always been, its infantry. Of those 205 divisions in 1941, 152 are infantry. Nearly 18,000 men strong, those divisions are expected to act largely autonomously and to react flexibly to situations in the field. Each carries a battalion of pioneers, reconnaissance units, signalers, and anti-tank units in its ranks. In addition, there are detachments of supply specialists, drivers, and medical personnel, as well as a large arsenal of at least a dozen different weapons, from grenade launchers to flamethrowers and heavy machine guns. Both the high technical standard and the versatility of its specialists give the German infantry division such high combat value that it really is unmatched in the first years of the war. However, this efficiency comes at a high cost. The Wehrmacht blazes like a bright flame, but it also burns itself out quickly. This year, 1942, between March and June, the Eastern Front is at a stalemate, and in the muds of the Rasputitsa, the German army is suffering a collective burnout. The men are mentally and physically exhausted, and morale is at an all-time low. Army High Command judges that of the 162 still active divisions in the East, only 8 are considered fully capable. By March 1942, a third of the Ostheer has in fact been swallowed up by the war, over 1 million casualties. And a lot of those are experienced officers, skilled specialists, and elite storm troops. Those are tough enough to replace. But even with the regular men, the degradation is extremely high. The Wehrmacht started the war with its strongest cadre, the men born between 1916 and 1919. Undergoing their compulsory service, they were fit, well-educated, and above all, motivated. At the same time, the older classes were reactivated, but training would take time. The limitations of the Versailles Treaty had put a hold on compulsory service, which meant that there was a big gap of untrained classes. The Universal Army experience, which had made the Kaiser's force so resourceful before, was simply missing within the new Wehrmacht. At first, frontline service was limited to men born after 1911. Men under 35 were put into the reserve, Landwehr, and men up to 45 years of age in the security force, Landsturm. But already, by the end of 1941, the army is drawing deeply from those reserves and has to call up an additional 300,000 replacements just to plug the gaps. 60% of those conscripts come from occupations previously considered reserved, like from the armament industries. By mid-1942, the entire workforce has shrunk by 1.4 million industrial workers who have been conscripted into the army and then replaced by slaves, or not at all. Even the third-class security forces, already overwhelmed by the vastness of captured Soviet territory, have been reduced from 360,000 to just 100,000. From the start, the Wehrmacht was designed to achieve one thing and one thing only: a military decision. The army was never intended to be used as an occupation force. But the lack of a military decision in the USSR means that the Wehrmacht is now stranded in hostile territory of its leadership's ideological enemy. Also, traditionally, the German soldier is apolitical. In fact, it was forbidden, even by Wehrmacht law, for the soldier to be part of any political organization, the Nazi Party included. Yet, The longer the army is pushed into an occupation role, the more it is prone to political influences. And it's not just the murder organizations of the SS that begin demanding more and more cooperation from regular army units. Officers of the German Secret Service, the Abwehr, also begin distributing political leaflets and propaganda newspapers among the troops. And small but fully motorized groups begin circulating the front, supervising and policing its administration. Dubbed the Gestapo of the Wehrmacht, they begin undermining the authority of divisional commanders. Until the mid-1930s, German officers came largely from aristocracy, and they prided themselves as both leaders and educators of their units. It was a rather exclusive club of intellectual managers, bound to professional and moral principles rooted in Prussian traditions. And Adolf Hitler hated and distrusted it to the core. On the Führer's personal orders, the officer corps is open to every German by 1942, no matter their background. The new Volksoffizier, according to National Socialist egalitarianism, is to be the counterpoint to the Prussian model. This eventually makes the German army even more top-heavy than it already was. In October 1942, the Army's officer corps is 181,000 men strong, but rises by mid-1943 to 250,000. But more than the officers, it is the new recruits that bring in a different attitude. By 1942, replacements are taken from the classes between 1921 and 1925, and those age groups have been fully embraced by Nazi organizations. In fact, 90% of those recruits have been members of such organizations, usually the Hitler Youth. These men are exceptionally intolerant towards the church, Jews, and communists. But the Wehrmacht has more than just manpower issues. From just an equipment standpoint, the Russian winter alone has hit the German army hard. Much of their equipment was developed for the comparatively mild conditions of Central Europe, and not for temperatures as low as 50 degrees below zero. Lacking properly insulated boots, coats, and even suitable tents, frostbite and trench foot are rampant. Many of the small arms as well fail under such conditions. The MG-34's fine mechanics cause it to jam frequently. Tanks and vehicles grind to a halt as oil and lubricants freeze solid. Optical sights marked as cold-proof fail because cold-proof only protects to minus 20 Celsius. Even the robust Kar 98 is useless when the tip of the firing pin crystallizes and breaks in the extreme cold. It is not until early 1942 that the Wehrmacht has access to low-temperature lubricants and frost-resistant oils. The condition in the deserts of North Africa, by the way, also have a similar effect. The extreme heat and dryness of the desert causes propellants to sweat and seals to fail. These are just a handful of the many problems Albert Speer has to solve when he replaces the deceased Fritz Todt as armament minister in February 1942. A new plan is made to push Germany into a war economy. It is to centralize and concentrate its available resources and effectively double the output of small arms. They begin simplifying designs and initiate mass production techniques in welding and metal stamping. Less complexity means less wastage of raw material and an increase in output. At the same time, though, Hitler and High Command pressed the industry to come up with new ideas and inventions to upgrade the common infantryman. The Soviet semi-automatic rifles of Simonov and Tokarev are more efficient in street fighting than the standard German bolt-action rifle. Same goes for the PPSH submachine gun, which many officers and NCOs favor for its reliability and 71-round drum magazine. Hitler gives manufacturers and designers the green light to revamp the army by any means necessary. One such revamped unit actually operates deep in the desert of North Africa. At the edge of the impassable Katara Depression, Major Otto Burkhardt's top-secret experimental battalion tests weapons that are sometimes even decades ahead of their time. Among the prototypes is a fully automatic rifle, an anti-tank pistol, bouncing mortar bombs, recoilless rifles, magnetic mines, and a 75mm field gun that can be dropped in via parachute. But the most promising weapon so far is the new MG-42. The belt-fed universal machine gun has a devastatingly high rate of fire and is made out of light but durable alloys. It is approved for mass production in the second half of 1942. German military leadership is well aware of the drawbacks of some of its standard armaments, and the hopes of a quick victory in the East had been put in the 17 Panzer and 17 motorized divisions there, the tactical spearheads of mobile warfare. A standard German panzer division in June 1941 is 13,300 men strong, boasting 200 panzers and 5,000 other vehicles like Krads, trucks, various armored reconnaissance vehicles. Problem is, by now, the majority of armor thrown against the Soviet Union in 1941 and much of 1942 as well is still the same type that invaded Poland and France in 1939 and 1940. Of those 200 tanks in a division, only 10% are the modern Panzer IV. The majority is still made up of outdated Panzer IIIs and obsolete Panzer IIs. The Panzer II is seen as little more than an underpowered reconnaissance tank, and even its thin armor is enough to make the engine constantly overheat in the Soviet countryside. The Panzer III, the Army's main workhorse in the Soviet Union and North Africa, is often unable to match the firepower and armor of opponents like the T-34. What has saved the often technically outclassed panzers has been described as the flight forward, the tactical operative advantages of improvisation and exploitation, as well as the close support provided by the Luftwaffe. Yet this comes at a high and unsustainable cost. By November 1941, even before the Soviet counteroffensive, most German panzer divisions are in such a dire state that they are in need of a full refit. Often there are only 30 tanks left within a division. High command can no longer ignore the pleas by the Army for stronger, more reliable tanks. On November 18th, a special Army commission, including Professor Ferdinand Porsche and representatives of MAN, Daimler-Benz, and Henschel, meet to discuss the construction of new panzers. Fighting on the Eastern Front emphasizes the need for better running gear, broader treads, and stronger guns, and most importantly, engines that will reliably move over unpaved roads and the rough countryside. Plans to replace the Panzer IV have been around since the late 1930s, but only now, with possible catastrophe on the horizon, does High Command try to build their own T-34. The MAN prototypes of the 45-ton Panzer V Panther are put to the test in late 1942. Hopes are high that hundreds of the new tanks will reach the Wehrmacht each month in the new year. I know many of you are familiar with the Tiger tank, which begins production in August 1942, but Panthers are far cheaper to make and are the model that is planned for production in huge numbers. Until production reaches the targets, they will still have to make do, though, with the old arsenal. The best equipped motorized forces are put together to fight as independent combat groups in emergency situations. The existing Panzer IIIs, IVs, and Stug 3s, well, they can be upgraded, and captured Soviet tanks are pressed into service. The Marder tank destroyer basically starts off by fitting a captured Soviet field gun onto an obsolete Panzer chassis. All this, however, is nothing more than a band-aid on the wound that is bleeding Germany's dwindling arsenal of guns, tanks, and men. Between July and November 1942, the Army loses more than 1,600 tanks, and the Sixth Army alone reports 115,000 casualties. Although the Soviet losses still exceed these figures by a significant amount, the Germans can simply no longer sustain nor replace such losses. Trapped in a downward spiral, the Wehrmacht must find a way to justify these losses with strategic benefits, or find a new way to regain some of its original strength. The Red Army has also been in need of a serious rebuild. We did a special episode about that too, which you can check out right here. And you can join the Time Ghost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com to get more great specials like these that flesh out what I do in the regular weekly episodes. And I think they're especially important. So it's the Army that finances all of these productions. And we've got a lot more planned for 1943. So join the Army if you have not already, and consider increasing your pledge if you have, and I will see you next time.